Do you believe in skinwalkers? So I've never believed in skinwalkers for as long as I've known they've existed, but after this night I genuinely might second guess it. When I tell this story, I don't know what it is, but I end up tearing up and almost like gagging from thinking of it. Information for the story, since I don't want to keep adding info mid-story, keep all this in mind. We had 3 cats in the house at the time, and my room upstairs was at the back of the house, so my window was facing towards the garden, which stretched really far back, until there was trees. And finally, we had an extension from the kitchen, which was basically a giant glass box. Even the ceiling of it was glass, and that's where the back door was made of glass too. No surprise. Also back then, I was very easily scared to the point where my mind would literally make me believe something stupid to scare me. One night, my mom and her boyfriend at the time was going out to eat somewhere. They said that they would be home around 1 to 2 a.m. and they left at about 9. At the time, I was 16 and it was one of the first nights I've had to be home alone, and it didn't help that we moved into this house only about a month ago. I decided to spend most of the night just playing some games with my friends online to pass the time, since I didn't really like being alone in the first place, let alone at night. But eventually, around midnight, my friends went off to do their own things, so I just sat and watched YouTube while I was upstairs. I heard a loud meow coming from outside, so I went downstairs, then went to the back door and let my cat in, who must have been out for a while since I don't remember letting her out. Went back upstairs, everything was normal, but after about 5 to 10 minutes I heard meowing again. Except this time it was almost like a cat screeching coming from the very back of the garden. I thought it's probably just foxes or anything else, but just to make sure I went downstairs once again and checked around the house for my cats to make sure that they weren't out there. As I expected, my cats were all in, but I wanted to see outside from the back door to see if I could maybe see what the sound was coming from. As I walked into my glass extension to the back door, I saw a cat staring back at me. Now, none of our neighbors have cats, and not even the ones after, and so on. I stood there in complete silence, staring out of my back door, keeping distance from it, while the cat on the other side, about 3 feet away from the door, was sitting there, staring right back at me in the pitch black. Something about its face didn't look right either, and it didn't help that its eyes were glowing at me in the dark. What scared me the most was the fact that when I walked into the extension, it was already sitting and staring right at the doorway which I came through, and for the entire time I stared at it, it didn't break eye contact with me once. It wasn't even like a stray cat that lives in the area. I've never seen this cat in my life. I slowly walked up to the door to check if it was locked, which it was, and then I rushed out of the extension and back upstairs to my room and closed the door. At this point, I was scared and genuinely terrified, and I know it all sounds stupid over a cat, but if you were there in that moment, you would be too, I guarantee it. Once I was in my room, I peeked through my blinds, and there the cat was, this time further up my garden so it could see me staring right up at my window. I was looking out of almost like it was waiting for me to check. I stepped back from my blinds instantly as I slowly started to feel worse about what was going on. I started to tell myself it was just a stray cat that I hadn't seen yet, and it was all just a coincidence. I went back on YouTube, but this time kept one ear off my headset from genuine fear. After about 5 minutes of seeing it out my window, I heard a faint knocking sound. I paused my video instantly and sat in pure silence and darkness, frightened, hoping I wouldn't hear it again, but I did, and I realized it was coming straight from my window. I stood up out of my chair and backed away from the window while trying to place my headset on the table as quietly as possible. I eventually got to my wall from backing up so much and stood up against it, and out of nowhere, the knock came back again. It got louder this time, sounding more aggressive, like it needed to get in, doing 2 to 3 knocks every time. Bear in mind there were no trees by my window or anything that could knock on it like that. I stood quietly, while the knocking carried on, but slowly got more distant in time between knocks, until eventually, my mom and her boyfriend came back. I tried to forget about what happened while talking to them about their night and saying goodnight to them. Once they went to bed, I felt calm about the situation, and felt like it could be forgotten about. But at around 1:30, the knocking came back. I instantly stood up, walked into my mom's bedroom, and asked her boyfriend to check outside my window, because I was too frightened to. He went up to my window and looked out of it, and turned around and told me there was nothing there. After he checked, the knocking completely stopped for the whole night, and I've never experienced something like it since. But there's an idea that just doesn't sit right with me. What if it saw me let my cat in and came up to my back door, hoping I would open the door for it too? But just the thought of something just waiting for me to try to get me to open my door and then my window just for a second so it could come in just bugs me.